The meeting hall was enormous. It was so big that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Tejo sat at the human table and watched the other aliens take their seats. He had been doing this for 15 years now. The same arguments. The same delays. The same disrespect. Beside him, Minji tapped her fingers on the desk. She was young, only 32, and still had fire in her eyes. Hyun sat quietly, watching everything with his military training. Isol made a joke under her breath, but nobody laughed. They were all tired. Today's meeting was about 3 star systems. Empty star systems. No life, no civilization. Just rocks and gas floating in space. Humans had found them 50 years ago. They sent probes. They did studies. They made sure nobody lived there. Then they built colonies. The Vrelians were angry about this. They said humans moved too fast. The proper way was to wait 200 years before settling new systems. That was the rule. Humans had only waited 70 years total. This was unacceptable. Tejo stood when his turn came to speak. He presented the evidence carefully. Maps, scientific data, proof that these systems were empty, proof that humans had followed every safety protocol, proof that nobody else had claimed these systems. The Vrelian representative didn't even look at the evidence. He said the issue wasn't about proof. It was about respect for tradition. Young species like humans needed to learn patience. They needed to understand their place. This was the 7th time in 3 years that someone had challenged human expansion. None of the challenges had succeeded, but each one took months to resolve. Months of meetings, months of arguments, months of being treated like children who didn't understand the rules. The Caltrex Federation supported the Vrelians. They wanted those systems for themselves even though they had never surveyed them. The Soothians voted to abstain, as they always did. The Letharians suggested forming a committee to study the issue. Maybe in 50 years they could reach a decision. 6 hours passed. They were still discussing whether the discussion was following proper procedure. Minji's jaw was clenched tight. Hyun wrote notes that nobody would read. Isol stared at the ceiling, probably counting the clouds. Then a young Vrelian diplomat said something that changed everything. He called humans impatient children who bought their council seat with weapons instead of earning it through longevity. Some of the other delegations applauded. Tejo raised his hand to respond. The council president looked at him and shook his head. Tejo had used his speaking time for the day. 8 minutes total. The Vrelians had spoken for 4 hours, but that was different. They were a senior species. The meeting ended with no decision. Another meeting was scheduled for 6 months later. The same issue. The same arguments. The same waste of time. Back in their quarters, the human delegation sat in silence. Minji wanted to say something angry, but Tejo's expression stopped her. He didn't look frustrated anymore. He looked like someone who had finally understood something important. That night, Tejo sent a message to Earth. It was encrypted and marked urgent. The message was simple. Humanity needed to evaluate whether staying in the council was worth it. He recommended they look at alternatives. Minji found him later, staring out at the stars through the station window. She asked if he really thought humans should leave the council. Tejo was quiet for a long moment. "We've been keeping records," he finally said. "Every insult, every delay, every time they blocked us for no reason. 200 years of data. Do you know what it shows?" Minji shook her head. "It shows that nothing we do will ever be enough. We can follow every rule perfectly and they'll just make new rules. We can wait 200 years and they'll say we should have waited 300. The system isn't designed to accept us. It's designed to keep us in our place." He turned away from the window. "So the question isn't whether we're good enough for the council. The question is whether the council is good enough for us." Minji felt something shift in her chest. She had been angry for years, thinking humans just needed to try harder. Now she realized Tejo was right. The problem wasn't humanity. The problem was a system that treated respect like something you could only inherit, never earn. Jan joined them at the window. He had been listening quietly, as always. "If we leave," he said, "they'll try to punish us." Tejo nodded. "Probably. But we've been preparing for that possibility for a long time. We just didn't realize it yet." The 3 of them stood there, looking out at the galaxy. Somewhere down on Earth, leaders were reading Tejo's message. Somewhere in human space, colonies were thriving without council help. Somewhere in humanity's future, A decision was forming. The council didn't know it yet, but something had broken today. Not in anger, not in revenge, just a quiet realization that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. 2 months later, President Junho called a meeting on Earth. The room was full of important people. Colony representatives, military leaders, scientists, economists. They all knew why they were here. Dr. Bora stood first. She was a xenoanthropologist, which meant she studied alien cultures. Her team had spent 200 years watching how the council treated humans. Now she shared what they had found. The data was clear. Humans were isolated within the council. Trade agreements always favored older species. Humans were kept off important committees. Science projects with aliens mysteriously failed. Territory disputes always went against humans, even when humans had proof on their side. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. The council didn't want humans to succeed. They wanted humans to stay small and grateful for whatever scraps they were given. But Bora had more to share. Something the council didn't know about. For 70 years, humans had been preparing for this possibility. Not openly, just quietly building something better. Admiral Ciano stood next. He commanded the human military, so he knew the real numbers. Human space now included 200 star systems. Every single one could take care of itself. They grew their own food, built their own ships, made their own medicine. Manufacturing capacity was enormous. Humans could build more in a year than most council species built in a decade. Agriculture produced 40% more food than humans needed. Scientific research was advancing faster than ever, because humans had stopped sharing their best discoveries with aliens who just took credit for human work. The human trade network connected every colony. Ships moved between systems using their own FTL routes. Humans didn't need council jump gates anymore. They had built their own. Defense Minister Yuna added the military assessment. The human defense fleet had 4,000 ships. Not the biggest fleet in the galaxy, but the most advanced. Human technology was decades ahead of council standard. Because humans innovated while the council held committee meetings about innovation. Humans had stopped sharing cutting-edge technology 50 years ago. Too many joint projects ended with humans doing all the work and aliens taking all the credit. So now humans just kept their best ideas to themselves. Then came the uncomfortable truth. Someone asked the obvious question, what did humans actually get from the council? The room went silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Trade? Humans mostly traded with each other now. Security? Human ships protected human space. Knowledge? Humans were discovering more on their own than they ever learned from the council. Respect? That was a joke. But here was the interesting part. The council needed humans. Earth's factories made 40% of the medicine used across council space. Human farms fed billions of aliens whose own planets couldn't grow enough food. Human ships patrolled trade routes that council security ignored. Human scientists solved problems that council bureaucrats couldn't even understand. The council had become dependent on human productivity. They just didn't realize it because humans had always been there, working quietly in the background. President Junho looked around the room. She didn't ask for a vote. Instead, she asked a different question. If we leave the council, what do we actually lose? Nobody could answer. Because the truth was simple. Humans would lose nothing they hadn't already been denied. The decision formed naturally. Humanity would withdraw from the council. Not in anger, not to punish anyone, just to redirect their energy towards something better. But they would do it carefully. Every trade contract would be honored until it expired naturally. Every joint project would be completed professionally. Every commitment would be kept. Humans wouldn't give the council any excuse to call them unreliable. They would simply stop renewing agreements, stop joining new projects, stop begging for acceptance. And then they would step back and let the council see what it was like without human help. Junho assigned teams to handle different aspects. Shiwu would manage the withdrawal timeline. Siono would secure human assets. Bora would document everything for history. And Daiho, still at the council station, would prepare for the announcement. As people filed out of the meeting, Junho stood alone for a moment. She thought about what this meant. Humanity had spent 200 years trying to earn respect from the council. Now they were choosing a different path. Not isolation, not revenge, just dignity. The simple dignity of saying no to people who didn't value you. She looked at Earth through the window. 200 star systems full of humans who worked hard, created amazing things, and deserved better than being treated like children. They would show the galaxy that you didn't need council approval to thrive. The message went out that night. Encrypted instructions to every human colony. Begin preparations for withdrawal. Secure all assets. Honor all commitments but make no new ones. And wait for the signal. Across human space, people received the news with mixed feelings. Some worried about isolation. Others felt relief. But most felt something else. Pride. Finally, humanity was choosing itself. 6 months after that meeting on Earth, the council gathered for another session, but this time was different. The humans had called for an emergency meeting. That had never happened before. Humans didn't have the seniority to call emergency sessions, except Deho had found an old rule. The right of final statement. Any species could use it before leaving the council. The rule was ancient and nobody had used it in 1,000 years. But it was still valid. The council chamber buzzed with confusion as aliens took their seats. What were the humans planning? Were they going to complain again? Demand another investigation? Threaten to withhold their trade? Deho stood. The room gradually went quiet. He looked calm. Not angry, not upset, just calm. He began to speak. Honored members of the Galactic Council. For 200 years, humanity has participated in this body. We have followed every rule. We have met every obligation. We have paid every fee. We have contributed our knowledge, our resources, and our good faith. The aliens listened. Some looked bored. This sounded like every human speech. Complaints wrapped in politeness. In return, we have been marginalized. Our proposals have been delayed. Our evidence has been dismissed. Our achievements have been minimized. At every turn, we have been treated as if our presence here is temporary, as if we are children waiting to grow up. Now some aliens shifted uncomfortably. Where was this going? We do not say this with anger. We say it with clarity. After careful thought, humanity has concluded that our interests are no longer served by council membership. Effective immediately, we withdraw. Silence. Complete silence. Then the chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted. Some demanded to know if this was legal. Others called it ridiculous. The Vrelian representative stood and yelled that humans couldn't just leave. Deho waited for quiet. He held up a data crystal. The council charter allows any member species to withdraw with proper notice. This is that notice. All relevant provisions are documented here. The council president looked shocked. He grabbed the charter and started reading. His face went pale. The humans were right. The rule existed. It was clear. A Caltrex delegate stood. But you have obligations. Treaties, agreements. You cannot simply abandon them. Minji stood now. She held up another data crystal. Every treaty humanity signed will be honored until it expires naturally. Every commitment will be kept. But we will negotiate no new agreements. We will seek no renewals. Here is the complete list. She placed the crystal on the table. The delegate stared at it like it was a bomb. A Soothian elder raised his hand for calm. When the noise died down, he asked quietly, "What does humanity hope to gain from this action?" Deho met his eyes. Freedom. Freedom to pursue our own path without constant obstruction. We bear no hatred. We seek no revenge. We simply choose to invest our energy where it is valued. Then he said something that made the room go cold. We are not alone in this feeling. 17 other species have approached us about forming alternative partnerships. Species who, like us, feel the council no longer serves their interests. 17 species. The number hung in the air. These weren't major powers, but they weren't nothing either. And if 17 species were talking to humans, how many more were thinking about it? The Vrelian delegate's face turned dark. This is a threat. You are trying to destroy the council. Deho shook his head. We are not destroying anything. We are simply leaving. What you do after that is your choice. The council president tried to regain control. He demanded that humans reconsider. He offered to form a committee to address human concerns. The committee would meet within the year and deliver recommendations within the decade. Deho listened politely. Then he responded with words that would be remembered for centuries. Your offer to form a committee to discuss forming another committee to investigate the possibility of addressing our concerns is noted. Under normal procedures, such a committee would deliver preliminary findings in approximately 60 years. We respectfully decline. The human delegation stood. They bowed to the assembly. Even now, even leaving, they showed respect. Not because the council deserved it, but because humans believed in courtesy. They walked toward the exit. Behind them, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted questions, demanded explanations, threatened consequences. But the humans kept walking. On their desk, they left one document. The formal letter of withdrawal. Simple, clear, final. As the doors closed behind them, Hyun allowed himself a small smile. "That went well," he said quietly. His soul laughed. "Did you see their faces when you mentioned the 17 species?" Daeho said nothing. He just walked forward, away from the council chamber. Away from 200 years of frustration. Toward something new. Behind them, in that chamber, 17 other delegations quietly requested urgent communications with their home governments. The seed had been planted. The council's control was beginning to crack. The first month after humans left was chaos. The Vrelian collective was furious. They declared that human withdrawal was an act of hostility. They demanded sanctions. They wanted to ban human ships from their space and freeze all human assets. The council debated for 3 weeks. The vote finally came. Sanctions passed, but barely. Almost half of the council members voted against it or abstained. That had never happened before. The unity was cracking, but votes didn't change reality. Reality was more complicated than the Vrelians expected. On the medical station orbiting Vrelian Prime, doctors started counting supplies. Pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, surgical equipment. Almost everything came from human manufacturers. Current stock would last 6 weeks. Their contracts with humans expired in 90 days. No renewals. The chief medical officer sent urgent messages to the government. They needed alternatives. The government contacted other suppliers. The responses were disappointing. Nobody else made the same quality products. Nobody else could deliver the same quantities. And everyone charged triple the price. The Caltrex Federation faced a different problem. Food. Their massive cities needed constant imports. 40% came from human agricultural worlds. Those contracts were expiring over the next year. Caltrex officials assumed replacing human food would be easy. Many species grew crops, but they quickly learned the truth. Human agricultural technology was 50 years ahead of everyone else. Human farms produced 3 times as much food from the same land. Replacing human imports meant finding 3 times as many suppliers at 4 times the cost. The trade routes proved another nightmare. For decades, human ships had patrolled the Orion Centauri corridor. It was a standard security agreement that expired in 90 days. When humans announced they wouldn't renew, nobody thought much about it. The first week after human ships left, piracy increased 400%. Pirates had always avoided that corridor because human patrols responded fast and hit hard. Now there were no human patrols. Council security forces tried to help, but they were spread thin. Too many committees to check with, too many forms to file. By the time council ships arrived, the pirates were long gone. On Earth, Director Jiwoo coordinated humanity's response. Her job was simple: honor every commitment perfectly, but make absolutely zero accommodations beyond what the contracts required. When the Vrelians requested emergency medical supplies, Jiwoo checked the contracts. The request was denied. Why? Because Vrelian sanctions banned human ships from entering Vrelian space. The humans couldn't deliver even if they wanted to. The Vrelians had insisted on the sanctions. Now they could live with the consequences. Not all council species were hostile. The Denari Union had always treated humans fairly. Their ambassador reached out through Isul, who still maintained some informal contacts. The question was simple: could they negotiate directly with humans outside the council framework? The answer was yes. Within 2 weeks, humanity signed a bilateral treaty with the Denari. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration, all the things the council supposedly provided but actually blocked. The difference was stunning. The treaty was negotiated in 3 weeks instead of 3 years. No committees. No senior species with veto power. Just 2 peoples who decided to work together as equals. The news spread fast. The Denari Treaty made headlines across the galaxy. Other species started thinking, if the Denari could negotiate with humans directly, why couldn't they? The Council's monopoly on diplomatic relations was starting to crack. Back on the Vrelian medical station, patients were being turned away. Not enough medicine. Not enough supplies. The chief medical officer tried everything. Rationing, alternative treatments, emergency purchases at ridiculous prices. Nothing was enough. Finally, in desperation, the Vrelian government tried to negotiate directly with human pharmaceutical companies. The companies politely referred them to Director Jiwoo. Jiwoo politely referred them to the sanctions they had demanded. The circle was complete. Caltrek cities saw food prices start to rise. Shortages appeared in some areas. People complained. The government tried to explain it was a temporary adjustment. But everyone knew the truth. The cheap, high-quality human food was going away, and nothing could replace it. Shipping companies started routing around the Orion Centauri corridor. It added weeks to transit times and massive costs, but it was safer than risking pirates. Trade slowed. Prices increased. The galactic economy began to feel the strain. Admiral Sianho watched all of this from Luna Command. Human intelligence tracked every development. Everything was going exactly as predicted. The Council had taken humanity's contributions for granted. Now the absence was being felt everywhere. The best part was that humans weren't doing anything aggressive. They weren't attacking. They weren't sabotaging. They weren't even being mean. They were simply not helping anymore. And that was enough. More species quietly approached human diplomats. Could they talk? Could they negotiate? Could they work together outside the Council? Every time the answer was yes. Humanity was proving something important. Life outside the Council wasn't isolation. It was freedom. And it was better. 6 months after human withdrawal, the situation was getting worse. The medical crisis on Vrelian Prime was now dire. Hospitals were running out of critical supplies. Doctors made impossible choices about who got treatment. The government maintained its proud public stance while desperately trying to find solutions in private. Alternative suppliers provided inferior products at triple the price. Some medicines didn't work as well. Some equipment broke down faster. Patients suffered. Doctors complained. The public started asking uncomfortable questions. In the Caltrex Federation, food riots broke out in 3 major cities. Replacement suppliers couldn't meet demand. Prices had doubled, then tripled. Poor families went hungry. The middle class struggled. Only the wealthy could afford food without worry. The Caltrex Assembly held an emergency session. A junior representative named Thalos did something that would end her career. She stood and spoke the truth. "We did this to ourselves," she said. "We alienated the most productive species in the galaxy because of our pride. We insisted on maintaining a hierarchy that served our vanity more than our interests. Now our people are hungry, not because humans attacked us, but because we pushed them away." The senior representatives censured her immediately. They called her speech treasonous, but recordings of her words spread across Caltrex networks. People watched. People thought. People started to agree. Maybe the problem wasn't human ambition. Maybe it was alien arrogance. The Orion Centauri corridor had become a lawless zone. Pirate attacks happened weekly. Ships were stolen. Crews were killed. Insurance rates went up 500%. Many shipping companies stopped using the route entirely, even though it added weeks to their journeys. Council security forces were useless. They had meetings about the problem. They formed committees to study the issue. They debated proper procedures. Meanwhile, ships burned and people died. The contrast with human efficiency was stark and embarrassing. On Luna Command, Admiral Sianho monitored everything with quiet satisfaction. This was exactly what human analysts had predicted. The Council took humanity for granted. Now the absence hurt everywhere. And humans weren't even being aggressive. They were just not helping. That was enough. Meanwhile, the alternative network grew rapidly. 6 more species signed bilateral agreements with humanity. The Tovan Collective, the Shella Confederacy, 2 species that had been neutral or even cold toward humans in the Council. Outside Council structures, everything moved faster. Negotiations that would take years finished in weeks. No bureaucracy. No senior species blocking progress. Just equals talking to equals. Ambassador Taiwan led a delegation to Earth. He represented the species that had treaties with humanity. They had a proposal. Instead of scattered bilateral agreements, they wanted something organized. A cooperative alliance, not a rival council. Something different. No hierarchy. No permanent seats. No species with veto power. Decisions by consensus when possible. When consensus couldn't be reached, Species remained free to act independently. President Junho listened carefully. The proposal was elegant. It addressed everything wrong with the council. It created cooperation without domination, partnership without hierarchy. We would be honored if humanity joined as a founding member, Taewon said. But we don't want you as our leader. We want you as our equal. That's the whole point. Junho smiled. This was what withdrawal had been about. Not isolation, not revenge. Creating something better based on respect. Back at the council, emergency sessions became routine. The senior species were divided. The Vrelians wanted harsher sanctions. Make an example of humanity. Crush this rebellion before it spread. The Litharians urged caution. The Soothians stayed quiet, gathering data. Finally, a Soothian economist named Elder Kreth presented an analysis. The numbers were devastating. The council economy was contracting. Trade volume down 18%. Key industries facing supply shortages. 23 species experiencing economic stress. Not from human action. From human absence. And the trend was accelerating. Kreth showed projections. In 1 year, the economic damage would be severe. In 2 years, catastrophic. In 5 years, some species would face total economic collapse. All because they had pushed away the most productive member of their alliance. The Vrelian delegate dismissed the analysis. We just need to find alternative suppliers. Develop our own capabilities. We survived for thousands of years before humans arrived. Kreth looked at him calmly. Yes, and then humans arrived and made everything better. Cheaper medicine, more food, better technology, safer trade routes. Now they're gone. You can't replace 100 years of human innovation in a few months. Some of you won't replace it ever. The session ended in bitter argument. But privately, Kreth shared his real conclusion with the Soothian leadership. The Galactic Council as it existed was finished. The structure couldn't survive. The only question was whether it would collapse in chaos or transform into something new. The Soothians began making plans. If the council was going to change, they wanted to shape that change. And they knew who to talk to about how to do it right. 1 year after human withdrawal, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in 3,000 years. The breaking point came from an unexpected source. The Caltrex Federation, one of the senior species that had supported sanctions against humanity, made a stunning announcement. They would negotiate directly with humanity for food imports regardless of council sanctions. The Federation's people were hungry. Pride couldn't feed them. The government had to act. The Vrelians were furious. They demanded the council censure Caltrex, punish them for breaking ranks, make an example. The vote came, it failed. 47 species voted against censuring Caltrex. The message was clear. The consensus was broken. 2 weeks later came an even bigger shock. The Litharians announced they were withdrawing from the Council's Joint Military Command. They would negotiate an independent defense agreement with humanity instead. This was massive. The Litharians were a founding species. They had been part of the Council since its creation 3,000 years ago. If they were leaving, anyone could leave. The dam broke. Within a month, 37 species announced they were joining the Cooperative Alliance. These weren't just small species either. The Denari Union, the Shella Confederacy with its 70 star systems, even some mid-tier council members. The council split into 3 groups. The hardliners, led by the Vrelians, insisted on maintaining the old order. They wanted to punish anyone who left. The reformists, led by the Soothians, argued the council had to change or die. And the departed, who had formally withdrawn. Nexus Prime Station became a symbol of failure. The council couldn't pass any major legislation. Every session dissolved into arguments. The Vrelians accused the Soothians of betrayal. The Soothians said refusing to adapt was suicide. Smaller species openly criticized the senior species for their arrogance. On Earth, President Junho received an unexpected visitor. Elder Kreth of the Soothian Empire arrived privately, not as an official representative. They met in Junho's home in Seoul. No aides, no recording devices. Just 2 leaders talking honestly. Kreth was direct. The council is dead. It might take 10 more years to formally collapse, but it cannot survive in its current form. Too rigid, too hierarchical, too dependent on ancient privileges that no longer reflect reality. Your withdrawal exposed this. Junho waited. There was more coming. But galactic civilization needs some framework. Kreth continued. Not for domination, For coordination, disease control, piracy suppression, scientific exchange. The Cooperative Alliance is good, but it cannot scale to the entire galaxy. And if the Council collapses without a successor, the hardliners will try to seize control through force. Kreth made his proposal. The Soothians would lead an effort to reform the Council from within, strip away the hierarchy, eliminate permanent seats and veto powers, create something like the Cooperative Alliance but bigger. They needed humanity's help, not as members but as partners. Junho thought carefully. The offer seemed genuine. The Soothians had always been fair to humans. But could the Council really be reformed? Or would this pull humanity back into the same dysfunction? Why should we help? Junho asked. We're doing fine without the Council. Better than fine. Kreth nodded. Because chaos helps no one. If the Council collapses violently, there will be war. The hardliners won't accept change peacefully. They'll fight. Many will die, including humans, because you'll be drawn in whether you want to be or not. He was right. Unyo knew it. A galactic war would hurt everyone. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Help us build something new. Share what you've learned with the Alliance. Show us how to make decisions without hierarchy. We'll push for reform inside the Council. You support from outside. Together we transform the system before it explodes. Junho considered for a long moment. Then she stated her terms. We will help. But we will not rejoin a reformed Council. We will work alongside it as an equal partner. The days of younger species begging for approval are over. If you want our help, you accept that we are equals. Not in theory. In practice, Kreth smiled. That is exactly what we need. Your withdrawal taught us that lesson. No species should have to beg for basic respect. They shook hands. The deal was made. The Soothians would lead internal reform. Humanity would help design the new structure and support it from outside. The Cooperative Alliance would serve as the model. The hardest part would be convincing the hardliners. The Vrelians and their allies would fight change with everything they had. But Kreth had data on his side. The economic damage was undeniable. More species suffered every month. Something had to change. As Kreth prepared to leave, he said something that would stay with Junho. You know what the real lesson is? The Council thought it was granting you membership as a favor. They never understood that your participation was a gift to them. They lost that gift through their own arrogance. Junho watched him go. The next phase was beginning. Not destruction of the old order. Transformation. And humanity would help. Not because they needed the Council, but because a stable galaxy served everyone's interests. The message went out that night. To every human colony, to every alliance partner, the work wasn't finished. Now came the hard part, building something better from the ruins of something broken. 2 years after human withdrawal, everything had changed. The old Galactic Council held its final session. After months of bitter debate, the reformist faction finally had enough votes. They dissolved the old council and created something new. The Galactic Cooperative Union, no permanent seats, no veto powers. All species equal. Decisions by qualified majority instead of consensus, so minorities couldn't block progress forever. The structure borrowed heavily from the Cooperative Alliance that humans had helped build. The Vrelian collective refused to join. So did 6 other hardline species. They tried to form their own bloc, claiming they were the true inheritors of council tradition. But without institutional authority, they were just another alliance among many. Within a year, 3 of them would quietly ask to join the Union after economic isolation became unbearable. Humanity negotiated a comprehensive partnership treaty with the new Union. Security cooperation. Trade agreements, scientific research, all as equals. Humans didn't rejoin as members. They worked alongside as partners. That was the critical difference. The new system was messier than the old council. More chaotic, more arguments, but also more dynamic. Decisions happened in months instead of years. Innovation accelerated. Species interacted directly instead of through bureaucratic layers. Some problems got solved quickly. Others proved impossible without someone forcing a solution. But that was the price of genuine democracy. Sometimes you couldn't force everyone to agree. Sometimes you had to accept disagreement and move forward anyway. 5 years after withdrawal, Deho sat in a cafe in Seoul. He was retired now. Minji had taken over as lead negotiator for Alliance-Union relations. Hyun commanded joint military operations with the Denari. Isel had written a best-selling book about the withdrawal that 40 species had translated. A young journalist asked Daeho if he had regrets. Did humanity make the right choice? Daeho thought about it. We didn't destroy the council. We held up a mirror. For 200 years we tried to fit into their system. We tried to earn respect by following their rules. Eventually we realized those rules were designed to prevent respect, not grant it. Our withdrawal forced other species to ask questions. Did they want to perpetuate a system based on hierarchy, or build something based on cooperation? Many chose cooperation. The galaxy is better for it. Not perfect, he added. Nothing is perfect, but better. More voices heard, power distributed, progress faster, and humanity is respected not for having the oldest civilization or biggest empire, but for proving you could walk away from a bad situation and build something better. Across human space, the change was real. Energy once spent navigating council politics now went to exploration and research. Scientific output had doubled. New colonies flourished. Cultural exchange with dozens of species happened naturally. On Luna Command, officers studied the withdrawal crisis as a case study. The lesson was simple. Sometimes the most powerful action is walking away. Humanity didn't defeat the council militarily. They simply withdrew their consent to be treated as lesser. That was enough. President Junho, serving her final term, wrote in her memoirs, "We didn't seek to lead the galaxy. We didn't need to prove superiority. We simply chose to invest our energy where it was valued. That choice created changes we couldn't predict. Not because we were special, but because the old system was so broken that someone had to leave first. It happened to be us." 10 years after withdrawal, the Vrelian Collective sent a delegation to Earth. They didn't apologize. Vrelians don't apologize, but they asked about trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. Minji, now Director of Interstellar Relations, received them politely. The past was past. Humanity held no grudges. If the Vrelians wanted to engage as equals, humanity was open to it. The resulting treaty took 3 weeks to negotiate. On Nexus Prime, now headquarters of the Galactic Cooperative Union, they built a memorial. It listed all the founding species of the original council from 3,000 years ago. And it listed the species whose actions forced transformation. Humanity was there, not in a place of honor, but listed among equals. The inscription read, "Democracy is not given. It is claimed by those willing to walk away from tyranny, even when tyranny wears the mask of civility." Below it, a quote from Daeho's final statement to the old council. "We do not seek your permission to be free. We simply claim the freedom that was always ours." The greatest victory wasn't changing the council. It was proving the council's approval was never necessary. Humanity didn't need acceptance from the old order. They created a new one that worked better. Daeho visited the memorial once years later. He stood reading the words with Minji beside him. She asked what he thought of it all now, looking back. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think we taught the galaxy something important. Respect cannot be demanded or inherited. It must be mutual. And if it isn't mutual, walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom," Minji nodded. Around them, species from across the galaxy moved through the station, trading, negotiating, collaborating, all as equals. The system wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that made all the difference. Somewhere in human space, a young child asked her parent why humans had left the council. The parent thought about how to explain it simply. Because sometimes, the parent said, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't treat you right. Not with anger, just with dignity. And then you build something better with people who do treat you right. The child understood. It was a lesson that would echo through generations. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their productivity. It was teaching everyone that you didn't have to accept disrespect. You could choose better. And that choice could change everything.